So, this happened last Saturday. It started out like any other trip to the grocery store with my wife. We had planned to pick up some things for the week, nothing too exciting. We're one of those couples that runs errands together, sharing tasks and, admittedly, a few annoyances. But this time, I had a feeling something wasn't right. We were browsing the aisles, and everything seemed fine at first. It was the usual back and forth about which brand of pasta sauce to buy. I'm a sucker for the organic stuff, while she's more practical, but I noticed a change in her behavior. She kept looking at her phone, texting in a way that seemed a little off. At first, I thought maybe she was texting a friend, but there was a strange tension in her movements. You know that vibe when someone's trying to hide something, but you can't quite put your finger on it? Well, that was the vibe I was getting. And me being me, I just shrugged it off. I mean, it's not like we've never had weird moments during errands, right? But then, it happened. I don't know what exactly tipped me off, but I felt it in my gut, something was definitely off. We were in the dairy section when it happened. My wife, who had been texting nonstop, suddenly stopped in front of the milk, staring blankly at the cartons. She didn't even notice me standing right next to her. I could see her grip tightening on her phone. That's when I decided to ask what was going on. I said, "Hey, is everything okay?" She didn't answer right away, which instantly made me uneasy. When she did speak, her voice was different. There was this edge to it, something I hadn't heard before. She told me it was nothing, just work stuff. But I could tell she was avoiding eye contact, and that's when I felt that sinking feeling in my stomach. My mind started racing. Why wasn't she being honest? Was there something more going on? And then, as if on cue, her phone buzzed again, and she looked at it, her expression changing instantly. She tried to hide it, but I saw the notification preview. "I miss you, can't wait to see you later." I froze. I can't even describe how I felt in that moment. It was like the world stopped for a second. My brain was trying to process what I just saw, but it didn't make sense. Who was texting her like that? My mind raced with 1,000 questions, all of them painful. I was angry, confused, but most of all, I was hurt. I stood there, frozen, staring at her. She must have noticed the change in my expression because her eyes widened, and she quickly shoved the phone in her pocket, almost like she was trying to erase the moment. She tried to brush it off, saying it was just a colleague from work, but I knew better. I don't know what came over me, but something snapped. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was devastated. I didn't even want to be in the store anymore. I just needed to get out, to figure out what was happening. I grabbed a few things from the shelf mechanically, not even thinking about the list anymore, and turned to leave. She followed me, but there was this strange silence between us that felt heavier than anything. By the time we were at the checkout, I was barely holding it together. I didn't want to cause a scene in front of the cashier or anyone else, but my heart was pounding in my chest. I could feel the tears welling up, but I refused to let them fall. Not here. Not now. But the drive home? That was when everything fell apart. The drive home was absolute torture. Every time I glanced at her, she was staring out the window, almost like she was trying to pretend nothing had happened. Her silence made everything worse. It felt like a wall had been built between us in that store, and now it was just a matter of who would say something first. I wanted to scream at her, demand answers, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Instead, I just kept replaying that moment in my head, the way she looked at her phone, the text I'd seen. It haunted me. Every possibility ran through my mind, each one more painful than the last. Was she having an affair? Was it just a harmless flirtation? Or was it something else entirely? I tried to ask her, but the words wouldn't come out. I could feel the weight of everything crashing down on me. We drove in silence for what felt like hours, though it was only about 20 minutes. By the time we pulled into our driveway, I was a mess. My hands were shaking, my heart was racing. She didn't get out of the car right away. Neither of us did. It was like we were both waiting for the other to break the silence. Finally, she spoke, her voice so quiet it was barely audible. "Are you going to say something?" Her words hit me like a slap to the face. I could feel my chest tighten, and suddenly the floodgates opened. It wasn't just about the text anymore, it was everything. The lies. The tension. The feeling that something had been off for months, but I'd been too blind to see it. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, but my voice came out shaking. What's going on? Who was that? Why didn't you just tell me? She looked at me, her face a mixture of guilt and frustration. It's not what you think, she said quickly, but there was a certain hesitation in her tone that only made me more suspicious. I didn't want to hurt you. My heart skipped a beat. Hurt me? You think this is about me being hurt? What do you mean? I was practically yelling at this point, but I couldn't control it. Everything I'd been holding back was now coming out in a storm. She finally turned to face me fully, her hands clasped in her lap. It's complicated. It's not what you think. I wasn't. But I didn't let her finish. I was too far gone. The anger and confusion were eating me alive. You think I'm stupid? I saw the damn text. Don't tell me it's not what it looks like. Who is he? The silence between us stretched, and I could see her fighting to hold back tears. And then, in the most unexpected moment, she whispered something that shattered me. He's someone I used to work with. We had a history. But it's over now. It's all over. The moment she said those words, I felt the blood drain from my face. We had a history. That one sentence spun me into a whirlwind of thoughts, none of them good. A history? What kind of history? What did that mean? My head was spinning. Part of me wanted to scream, part of me just wanted to curl up and disappear. I could feel the rage rising again, but something else, something deeper, was creeping in. I was confused, hurt, betrayed. But there was a tiny part of me, buried deep down, that still wanted to believe her. She wiped away a tear, her voice barely above a whisper now. I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to happen. But it did. And when it ended, I didn't know how to deal with it. I never meant to keep it from you, I swear. But the text, that was just me trying to move on. I couldn't even look at her. The anger, the disbelief, it was all bubbling up inside me. It wasn't just the affair, it was everything, the fact that she had kept something so huge from me, that she hadn't trusted me enough to be honest with me before. How had I not seen the signs? For a moment, I just sat there in silence, staring ahead at the dashboard. My thoughts were a jumble, and my mind kept bouncing between wanting answers and wanting to escape from the situation entirely. I couldn't process it. I needed space. I needed time. I don't know what to say to you right now, I muttered, my voice cracking a little as I finally managed to look her in the eye. We sat there for what felt like hours, neither of us moving. The car was silent except for the faint hum of the engine. I could barely focus on anything other than the overwhelming weight of her confession. All the feelings I had been suppressing, anger, betrayal, confusion, were now pouring out of me, but in a quiet, devastating way. It wasn't the explosion I thought it would be, but something deeper, more suffocating. Eventually, I turned to her. I need some time. I can't just process this all at once, I said, my voice steady but exhausted. It wasn't just the affair. It was the fact that she had kept it from me, that she had been living this hidden part of her life without ever giving me a chance to understand. How long had she been carrying this around? She nodded, wiping away another tear. I know. I understand. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I don't want to lose you. It felt like a knife to the chest. She didn't want to lose me? She had already pushed me away in ways I didn't even know were possible. But I couldn't find the words to express all of that. Instead, I just nodded and told her I needed space. We didn't talk the rest of the night. I went to bed in a haze, my mind racing. I couldn't sleep, tossing and turning for hours, questioning everything. The future of our relationship seemed uncertain. But what hurt the most was the feeling of being alone in all of it, even though she was lying next to me. That night, I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the day. Every word she'd said, every look she'd given me, felt like it had a hidden meaning I couldn't decipher. I kept going back to the text, "I miss you, can't wait to see you later." The words echoed in my mind, making my stomach twist. Who was this person? What kind of history had they shared? And why hadn't she told me sooner? My mind bounced between anger and sorrow, but mostly sorrow. I kept wondering if everything we'd shared, everything I thought we had, was a lie. Was I just too naive to see it? Did I not know her at all? The longer I laid there, the more I questioned my own judgment. How had I missed the signs? We had always communicated, or so I thought. We had talked about everything, our hopes, our dreams, even our little annoyances. But this? This felt like an entire secret life she'd been living, and I was the last to know. I tried to get up and walk it off, but the weight of it all kept me frozen in place. The guilt was eating at me. I kept thinking about what I could have done differently. Could I have noticed? Could I have prevented this? And then it hit me, maybe it wasn't about what I could have done. Maybe it was about what she chose not to do. The morning came too soon. I hadn't slept a wink, but when the sun started creeping through the blinds, I knew I had to face the reality of the situation. I rolled out of bed slowly, trying not to disturb her as she lay there next to me. She was asleep, but even in her sleep, she seemed distant, like I could feel the emotional distance between us, even when she wasn't awake. I stumbled into the kitchen to make coffee, my mind still in a fog. The quiet of the morning felt suffocating. I couldn't remember the last time I felt this detached from her. It wasn't just the betrayal I was dealing with, it was the fact that I didn't know what came next. I didn't know who she was anymore. She came into the kitchen a few minutes later, rubbing her eyes and looking like she hadn't slept either. The awkward silence between us was palpable. She tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I know I messed up. I don't want to lose you." Hearing her say that almost made it worse. It was like she wanted to undo everything, like a simple apology could erase all the hurt. But I couldn't pretend it didn't matter. This mattered. She'd broken my trust. And no matter how much she apologized, it wasn't going to fix that. I took a deep breath. I need some time. I don't know what I need yet, but I need space to think. Her face fell, and she bit her lip, clearly trying to hold back tears. "I understand," she said, her voice cracking. I love you. Please, don't give up on us." But I wasn't sure I could promise her that anymore. The rest of the day was a blur. I went for a long walk, trying to clear my head. It was a quiet Sunday, and the weather was perfect, cool, with a hint of sunlight that made everything feel peaceful. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the heaviness in my chest. I kept replaying the moments from the night before, questioning everything. I thought about the good times we'd shared, all the laughs and the late-night talks, and then there was this gut-wrenching realization, I couldn't trust her anymore. Not like I used to. Not like I thought I could. At some point, I ended up at a park, sitting on a bench by the lake. The peacefulness around me felt completely out of place with the chaos inside my mind. I needed clarity. I needed to figure out what I was going to do next. Was I going to stay? Was I going to try to work through this mess? Or was this the end? I knew that deep down, I wasn't ready to make a decision yet. I still loved her, but love wasn't enough to erase the hurt, the anger, and the feeling of betrayal that was eating away at me. I realized that I had to make a decision soon, but it couldn't be rushed. I had to do what was best for me. The next morning, I knew we couldn't keep avoiding the conversation. I couldn't just let things fester in silence. We had to talk, even though I wasn't sure how we'd even start or where it would lead. But I was tired of feeling like we were living in this limbo. She was sitting at the kitchen table when I walked in. Her face was drawn, eyes red from lack of sleep, but there was a softness to her that made me feel guilty for wanting to be so angry. But I couldn't help it. My feelings were all over the place. I sat down across from her and just stared at my coffee for a moment. Neither of us spoke at first. The silence felt so heavy, but at least it wasn't awkward, just tense. Finally, she broke the silence. I know I've messed up, but I don't want to lose you. I need you to understand that it wasn't about us. It wasn't that I didn't love you. It was me. I was confused. I've been confused. I took a deep breath and tried to process her words. Confused? That's what this was about? I couldn't wrap my mind around it. You think being confused is an excuse? I asked, my voice a little sharper than I intended. You think that's enough to just hide things from me, to betray my trust like that? Her eyes welled up, and I could see the regret in them, but the anger in me wouldn't let up. No, it's not an excuse. I know that. But I swear, it was never about you. It was about me not knowing what I wanted. About not knowing how to end something that was never really over. I sat there, trying to absorb it all. This wasn't just a betrayal of trust. It was about insecurity, unresolved feelings from the past. And I wasn't sure if I could work through it. Was I willing to work through it? The days following that conversation were a blur of emotions. I kept oscillating between anger and a strange, painful pity. I wanted to understand, wanted to believe her when she said it wasn't about me, that it was about her own unresolved feelings. But a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been lied to for too long to just let it go. At night, I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling both numb and restless. What was the right thing to do here? Was it better to walk away and protect myself from further hurt, or should I try to work through this mess, rebuild trust, and start fresh? But rebuilding trust wasn't something that could happen overnight. It wasn't just about forgiving her, it was about forgiving myself for not seeing the signs sooner. How could I have been so blind to it all? I spent a lot of time reflecting on the relationship, on the good, the bad, and everything in between. We had shared so many memories together, and those weren't easy to just throw away. I couldn't erase the love I had for her, no matter how betrayed I felt. And I knew I couldn't make any decisions while my mind was clouded with emotion. The truth was, I didn't have the answer yet. I needed more time. A few days later, we sat down again. It wasn't as tense as before, but the weight of the situation still hung heavy in the air. I knew that whatever happened next, it had to be a real conversation. There were no more half-truths or silence between us. I needed to know where we stood, no more avoiding it. I'd been thinking a lot, I began, my voice steady but quiet. And I can't keep going back and forth. I don't want to keep living in this uncertainty. I need to know if we can fix this. If we can rebuild. Her eyes locked on mine, and for a moment, there was this vulnerability in her gaze that softened the edges of my anger. I want to fix this too, she said, her voice filled with quiet desperation. I'm sorry. I know I hurt you. But I swear to you, I love you. I want to make it right. The sincerity in her voice was undeniable, but I knew words alone weren't going to fix what had happened. This was going to take more than just apologies. It would take effort, transparency, and patience, things we hadn't really had in the past few months. She'd been hiding things from me, and I needed to know that it wouldn't happen again. I need you to be honest with me. Completely honest. No more secrets, I said, my voice firm. I don't know if I can move forward unless I know I can trust you again. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I promise. No more secrets. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. It wasn't a perfect solution. It wasn't a magic fix. But for the first time in days, I felt like we were on the same page. Maybe it wouldn't be easy, maybe it wouldn't even work, but we were both willing to try. After that conversation, things didn't magically get better overnight. Trust, as I was beginning to understand, wasn't something that could be repaired with just a promise. It took time, and it took work. But we were both committed to doing it, even though I could see the fear in her eyes and the uncertainty in mine. Over the next few weeks, we started rebuilding. Slowly. She made an effort to be more open, more transparent, texts became shared, plans were discussed ahead of time, and the emotional distance that had settled between us began to close, bit by bit. I still had moments where the betrayal would hit me out of nowhere, and I'd have to fight the urge to shut down completely, but I kept pushing myself to be present. There were tough days. Days when I still wondered if we could make it through this, and days when I'd catch myself doubting everything we had. But there were also small victories. Moments when she'd show me that she was trying, and moments when I realized that I wasn't holding on to the hurt as tightly as before. It wasn't perfect. I think it will never be completely the same. But we were working on it. And that, in itself, felt like progress. Looking back on everything now, I can see how far we've come. I'm not going to pretend that it was easy, or that the pain ever fully went away. But I did learn something important: trust is fragile, and it's a hell of a lot easier to break than to rebuild. But that doesn't mean it's impossible. For anyone else out there going through something similar, here's what I've learned: if you're in a relationship, you have to be willing to face the tough stuff. The ugly truth, the things you don't want to hear, and the moments when it feels like everything is falling apart. But it's also about being open to forgiveness, both for the other person and for yourself. Healing doesn't happen overnight, and sometimes you have to decide if it's worth fighting for. But you can't make that decision unless you're honest with yourself about what you really want. As for us, I'm not sure where it'll go from here, but I do know that we're both committed to trying. That's all we can do for now.